Hybrid power, says Lexus IS chief engineer Naoki Kobayashi, is both the personality and the biggest strength of our brand. Proof of that is delivered with the IS 300h, a car that offers independent thinking buyers in the compact executive saloon sector a real alternative to the kind of four-cylinder diesel engine that most would otherwise choose. Buying a compact executive saloon, something like a BMW 3 Series, an Audi A4 or a Mercedes C-Class, then you're probably buying a diesel. Should you be? Lexus thinks not. For the same kind of money, their IS 300h petrol-electric hybrid is quieter, cleaner, more economic, better equipped, and all set to save you plenty on your tax bill. Best of all, perhaps, it's different. For some, that'll be reason enough to try it. Most, though, will need a bit more convincing, in which case the quoted returns, the combined cycle 65.7 miles to the gallon figure and 99 grams per kilometre of CO2, should get your attention, as should the fact that choosing this car over, say, a comparable Mercedes C-Class diesel would save a higher rate taxpayer over £900 a year. If that's piqued your interest, then a glance at the car itself should keep it. So, is it a model you should add to your wish list? Let's find out. The variant that attracts all the interest in the IS lineup is the model I'm driving here, the IS 300h petrol-electric hybrid. Unlike the brand's slightly smaller CT 200h hybrid model, it's more than a smartened up Toyota Prius, instead based on a proper large Lexus, the BMW 5 Series sized GS 300h. True, the 2.5 litre engine used may only offer 4 cylinders, but it does develop 178 brake horsepower, with a further slug of power contributed by an electric motor, resulting in a combined 220 brake horsepower output. That's enough to easily match the performance of the rival 2-litre diesel models at which this car is aimed, 0 to 62 miles an hour occupying 8.3 seconds on the way to 124 miles an hour. Why just 124? Well, it's down to use of a special gear train for the electric motor that reduces weight and cuts friction in return for restricted flat-out pace. A reasonable trade-off in my book. After all, when was the last time you drove quicker than 120 miles an hour? If you are going to be driving this car hard, then you'll find that the rubber belt-driven CVT 6-speed auto gearbox, installed because the ordinary IS250 model's conventional mechanical unit didn't fit, well, that CVT can start to frustrate attempts at meaningful progress. To be honest, I've yet to drive a CVT auto that responded to the throttle, and in this case the gear shift paddles, in the way that it should, and here the same issues remain. Plonk down your right foot and there's a noticeable pause before the transmission adjusts its gearing, after which there's another thrashy gap between the revs rising and the pace increasing. This is one reason why this IS struggles with its sports saloon billing. The other is the way that the hybrid system goes about creating its impressive efficiency by allowing the engine to rev up and down in a way that's quite unconnected to your actual road speed. As drivers, we tend to rely on these auditory cues to gauge how fast we're going. For example, during deceleration, when you hear the engine note play down different tones through different gears. In this Lexus, though, you can be decelerating while the engine note is ascending the scales. It all takes a bit of getting used to. Lexus's answer to this problem is rather novel. A little switch that activates a loudspeaker, emitting a synthesized engine noise. Its pitch governed by the speedometer. Yes, really. As you slow, so does the aural accompaniment. Throw in a downshift, and you'll hear the sound flare in response. You even get 6 frequency registers for the 6 gears you control via the steering wheel paddles. A gimmick in almost any other car I'd have said so, but here it really does help you attune with hybrid motoring that little bit quicker. The noise synthesizer even makes a reasonable attempt at simulating a V6 growl at full throttle, though personally I'd have tuned it to change up to the sound of the Lexus LFA supercar's howling V10, but maybe that's just me. If you find the whole setup annoying, you can easily switch it off, but you shouldn't need to, for once up at cruising speeds, it doesn't intervene anyway. This IS300H then reverting to the kind of whisper quiet progress that was previously the preserve of top-end luxury saloons. At lower speeds, as with most hybrids, the car can trickle along powered by the 230-volt nickel metal hydride battery pack only, as it will from start off, or with just the engine, if you're giving it full throttle, or more usually with a combination of both, something you can monitor via a graphic display in the centre of the dash. And unlike, say, a Honda hybrid, you don't have to have that combination approach if you don't want it. As long as the engine's warmed up, pressing this EV button near the gear stick will keep the car in all-electric mode from anything between a few hundred meters and just over half a mile, provided that there's charge in the battery and you keep to below 25 miles an hour. Once you do need to use the engine, you get the usual hybrid benefit that power which would otherwise be wasted while braking and accelerating can be used to charge the batteries that drive the electric motor, readying things for the next time you want to trickle along in all-electric silence. Once the engine has cut in to dominate proceedings, it'll be a case of making the best selection from this standard drive mode select system, a setup that tweaks engine output, throttle response, gear shift times, and even air conditioning functionality through 4 main settings. There's normal, if you want to leave the software to do its own thing, but otherwise you can select eco for efficiency, snow for slippery roads, or sport for performance motoring that comes with the accompaniment of a red tinged hue on the instrument panel ahead of you. Those likely to want to be selecting sport on a regular basis are the folk being targeted by a firmer sprung and more dynamically inclined F-Sport variant, which also comes with the option of an AVS adaptive variable suspension system that gives you a 5th Sport Plus option on the drive mode select controller. Thanks to sensors that automatically adjust the suspension performance at all 4 wheels in response to your driving style and road surface conditions, AVS enables you to adjust the car precisely to suit the mood you're in and the road you're on. Even without it, I'd suggest this to be the best handling Lexus I've ever experienced. Developed at the fearsome Nürburgring Nordschleife, it tackles the bends really nicely, thanks not only to this hybrid model's perfect 50-50 weight distribution, but also to a body shell 10% stiffer than that of the previous model, and a redeveloped double wishbone front and multi-link rear suspension design that decreases body roll by 25%. Unusually for a Lexus, the steering is particularly good, with pin-sharp accuracy and a nicely weighted feel, despite the all-electric setup. The ride's good too, even if you choose the 18-inch wheels and the F-Sport model's firmer suspension, with enough suppleness about it to cope with our hopeless road surfaces. Plus, the stability control system is one of the best in the business, intervening gently and almost imperceptibly. Get this car on a test track with all its electronic aids disabled, and you'll find a chassis that's as playful and talented as you'd expect for a car that's enjoyed thousands of hours of honing around that infamous bit of tarmac in Germany. As good as anything in the class? I'd say so. Lexus has decisively shifted from bland to bold with this 3rd generation IS. Doubtless there'll be a few who don't take to this Mark III model's more extreme styling, but my guess is it'll win a good deal more admirers thanks to its more assertive persona. At the front here we get the signature Lexus spindle grille, flanked by xenon headlamp clusters underlined by daytime running lights fashioned in the L of the Lexus logo. It delivers a highly distinctive visual signature that's even more dramatic if you've an F-Sport model with a mesh front grille and a swoopier front spoiler. That front grille defines the dynamic shape of the body, the starting point for creases that widen across the powerfully domed bonnet before passing through the base of the front pillar and tightening as they flow towards the rear. The shape is certainly expressive with its muscular front wings and flared wheel arches, and features a strong horizontal beltline that's supposed to create the impression of larger rear tyres and a lowered centre of gravity. And just look at this rear light cluster. It seems to start from the rear wheel arch before framing the rear number plate. It even incorporates an aero stabilising fin. Lovely. Before I get all carried away, I should point out that, more importantly, this is a bigger car than before, 75mm longer and 10mm wider. In fact, the extra size paying big dividends when it comes to rear seat space, traditionally a shortcoming not only for this Lexus, but for most of its direct rivals. Get inside and you'll find that the extra space the bigger wheelbase generates has been well used, whereas the old IS was pretty cramped back here. This one offers best-in-class standards of knee room. There's 85mm more of it than before, aided by front seats that are thinner than the old car. Headroom's not as impressive though, and as is the case with obvious rivals, you certainly won't want to be stuck in the middle at the back, legs astride the inevitably prominent transmission tunnel here. Up front, first impressions are very positive indeed. For a start, the basics are right. All-round visibility is good, the mirrors are big and clear, and the driving position is adjustable in just about every imaginable way. And the seats, pedals and steering wheel all feel great. But it's more than that. Put bluntly, this cabin feels better built with higher quality materials than anything else in the class, and by quite a margin too. Even the faux leather looks realistic, and there's plenty of the proper stuff too. Highlights include the lovely analog dashboard clock and the touch-sensitive electrostatic switches that you use to adjust the air conditioning temperature. Oh, and the way that the electric windows slow as they gradually close with a lovely softened thud. As with bigger Lexus models, the dash is split into distinct display and operation zones, the upper display section dominated by a 7-inch LCD infotainment screen. If that includes satellite navigation, then operation can be marshalled by the 8-way movable so-called mouse that you'll find in the lower operation zone here, with functionality that not everyone likes. It does, after all, take quite a subtle touch to guide the cursor where you want it to go. Once you've got the hang of it, though, it all works fine. Overall, I'm not sure the control systems can quite edge Audi, but it's a close-run thing. The seats, with their lovely quilted finish, are also worth a mention, as those drivers who like a sporty feel can get hunkered right down in the car, while those who prefer a more elevated view can jack them up a fair way. And the boot? Well, the batteries that must be housed beneath its floor in this hybrid IS300H model rob you of 30 litres of space, but that still leaves a class competitive 450 litres of room on offer. And as long as you avoid entry-level trim, there's a 60/40 split folding rear seat for those times when you want to avoid the home delivery charge after a trip to IKEA. So, what'll you pay to get Lexus Hybrid Drive in your compact executive saloon? Less perhaps than you might think. Prices across the IS300H petrol-electric lineup start at around £30,000. Whichever variant you decide upon, there's just this sole 4-door saloon body style, but buyers do get the option of more dynamic F-Sport trim for an extra £4,000. So, what kind of value proposition does that represent in a compact executive saloon segment where there's nothing quite like this IS300H hybrid model? Yes, you can get hybrid versions of the similarly sized BMW 3 Series and Infiniti Q50, but they're both based around thirstier and more powerful V6 petrol engines and will set you back around £10,000 more. That leaves this Lexus really competing more directly with 2-litre diesel models in this sector, or at least the more powerful ones. Essentially, you're looking at the BMW 320d, the Mercedes C220 CDI, and the Audi A4 2-litre TDI 177 PS, all of which will demand the same kind of £30,000 budget when ordered with the automatic gearbox that's standard on this Lexus. Also similarly priced is the Infiniti Q50 2.2D, another novel Japanese alternative to the German class leaders. If, having considered all of this, you conclude that it is a Lexus IS that you really want, then one of the reasons behind your decision is likely to be an expectation of a very complete standard specification. And, by and large, you won't be disappointed. Though I'd expected the entry-level variants to come complete with executive basics like parking sensors, front fog lamps and rain-sensing wipers. You do, of course, get these further up the range, and all models come complete with plenty else. Now that means alloy wheels, HID auto headlamps with LED daytime running lights, power folding heated mirrors, hill start assist control to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions, cruise control, a 6-speaker stereo system with DAB digital radio plus an aux-in socket and a USB port, Bluetooth phone compatibility, and the Drive Mode Select system that lets you tune the car's responses to the way you want to drive. If you're the kind of person likely to be using Drive Mode Select regularly, then you might want to consider finding the extra to get yourself into an F-Sport model, which in IS300H guise is the only variant in the range to offer the option of the AVS Adaptive Variable Suspension System. The F-Sport package does, however, include a standard, more dynamic styling, firmer suspension and LFA supercar style instrument graphics. The premium required doesn't get you leather trim though. For that, you've to stretch to a top-of-the-range Premier variant like the one I have here, a car that also adds niceties like heating and cooling for 8-way adjustable powered seats and a truly excellent 15-speaker, 12-channel, 835-watt Mark Levinson premium surround sound system. You also get a hard disk-based sat-nav with 3D dynamic route guidance and some very clever features like a weather radar display and the ability to use Google local search via your phone with addresses from Google Maps downloadable as navigation destinations. The system also includes Lexus Connected Services, a setup that can show you local car parks, tell you how pricey they are and direct you to them. You can also get Google Street View and what's called Panoramio, a photo sharing service that allows images to be uploaded for viewing on the center console display. Safety kit includes the usual things: a pedestrian-friendly bonnet, Isofix child seat fastenings, and no fewer than 8 airbags, twin front, side and curtain bags, plus knee bags for both front seat passengers. Plus, there are all the usual electronic driving aids for braking, traction and stability to try and ensure that you'll never have to use them. Now, in most other cars, these systems would activate when you're driving on the ragged edge. In an IS, though, it's all done a bit more cleverly. The so-called Lexus Vehicle Dynamics Integration Management setup, coordinating everything together and taking action to correct the car just that little bit earlier. You can go further still on the safety front, but only if you've opted for this flagship Premier variant, which offers 2 key options in this regard. The first will see your car fitted with a rear-mounted radar that powers a blind spot monitor to stop you from dangerously pulling out to overtake in front of another car, and a rear cross traffic alert system that warns you of an approaching vehicle when you're reversing out from a parking space. The other option is to specify what's called a technology pack with 4 further systems. Automatic high beam dips your headlights for you at night. Lane departure alert stops dozy drivers from veering out of their lanes on the highway. Adaptive cruise control automatically keeps you a safe distance behind the car in front on the motorway, and a pre-crash safety system scans the road ahead to detect potential accident hazards, warning you as they appear and even braking the car if you don't respond. On to consider the running costs of the petrol-electric IS300H hybrid that I'm driving here, which make very impressive reading indeed, even against the best of this car's 2-litre diesel-powered compact executive saloon rivals. Let's start with cleanliness. A rival Audi A4 2-litre TDI 177 PS Multitronic chugs out 127 grams per kilometre of CO2, while a Mercedes C220 CDI Auto does slightly better with 116 grams per kilometre. Both are bettered by the automatic version of BMW's 320d Efficient Dynamics model, that's 109 grams per kilometre, but all three are trumped by this Lexus's 99 grams per kilometre figure, a return that'll remove the need to pay the annual road tax that you'll need to have with all three of the dirtier German alternatives. That CO2 return also means a reduction in benefit-in-kind company car tax to just 11%. Plus, this car won't suffer from the 3% benefit-in-kind surcharge that's applied to all diesels. Independent experts Quick Car Cost reckon that a 40% taxpayer who opts for an IS300H will save around £907 a year in tax over the cost of running a comparable Mercedes C220 CDI. As for fuel consumption, the official figures suggest that this IS300H is capable of 65.7 miles per gallon on the combined cycle if you select the Eco mode on the Drive Mode Select system, a return that betters that of the Mercedes and Audi models I just mentioned and gets within a few percentage points of the class-leading Efficient Dynamics 3 Series BMW. Running cost realities, though, suggest that in mixed highway use, a good diesel will give you better returns than any hybrid. And that's certainly been borne out by the figures that I've been achieving with this test car. Around town, though, the advantage switches back to petrol-electric power, so your ultimate figures really come down to the kind of driving that you're likely to be doing, and the trim level you specify. The bigger wheels and extra weight you get with a top-spec version like the one I have here see its returns deteriorate to 109 grams per kilometre of CO2 and 60.1 miles to the gallon. There are also a few other things to consider, most of which count in Lexus's favour. First, its greenness isn't just about low CO2. In driving this car, you'll be emitting much lower volumes of oxides of nitrogen and particulates too, the latter element likely to be a key part of future emissions regulations. Second, maintenance costs will be substantially lower than those of a comparable diesel, thanks to the fact that hybrids look after their tyres and brake pads more carefully and have no need of servicing or replacement of the starter motor or the alternator. Third, I should make the obvious point that petrol's cheaper to buy than diesel. And finally, Lexus residuals are amongst the strongest in the sector. Independent specialist CAP reckon that after 3 years and/or 60,000 miles, this IS300H should still be worth around 37% of what you originally paid for it. Its insurance groupings range between 32 and 34. Now, I've added all those factors together and done a few calculations to come up with a pence per mile figure based on 3 years and 36,000 miles of use. For this Lexus, it's 68.03 pence per mile, about 14 pence per mile less than you'd pay to run BMW's supposedly super efficient 320d. Enough said. In terms of peace of mind, well, Lexus is so confident about the robustness of its hybrid technology that it's covered the engine with its own separate 5-year warranty. The rest of the car gets a 3-year package. Be honest, you weren't originally thinking of buying a car of this kind with a hybrid engine, were you? Having second thoughts? If you were, I wouldn't blame you. Hybrid power, you see, suits the IS perfectly. Buyers tend to be drawn to the Lexus brand for its quality and refinement, and the whisper quiet takeoff you get in this car only serves to underscore its feeling of peerless build integrity. At low speeds, you'd almost believe the engineers if they told you this thing was propelled by goose down. And once properly on the move, well, as I've said, it's certainly true that a good turbo diesel will give you a sportier drive. This car's CVT auto gearbox doesn't help it in this respect. And that diesel might also give you better real-world economy. But this cleaner Lexus is certainly fast enough and impressively frugal on its cheaper green pump fuel. It's a car then that rather refreshingly flies in the face of established thinking in the BMW 3 Series segment. Smart, quiet, luxurious and well equipped, it's a model you can feel proud of amongst a sea of German badged alternatives. Not an obvious choice perhaps, but then that's precisely why you might want one so much. Independent thinkers should form an orderly queue.